The call came in at 2014 in the afternoon on a Wednesday, and I know the exact time because I just checked my phone during a safety briefing at the Fort McMurray site. My foreman was walking us through a new protocol for confined space entry, and I had no business looking at my screen, but something made me glance down right when my sister-in-law's name appeared. I almost didn't answer. Tanya and I had never been close. She'd always been polite to me in that careful, deliberate way people are polite to someone they tolerate for someone else's sake. But she was calling from her landline, not her cell, which she never did, and something about that detail made my thumb move. Ian. Her voice was wrong, flat in a way that scared me more than shaking would have. I need you to go home right now. I'm looking at your backyard from my kitchen window, and I can hear Noah screaming. Your brother-in-law's truck is in the driveway. I was already walking toward the parking lot. How long has he been screaming? A pause, long enough that I almost called 911 first. I called you because I didn't know if maybe it was something normal, but Ian, it doesn't sound normal. My truck was parked at the far end of the gravel lot, Fort McMurray to Sherwood Park, Edmonton area. 3 hours on a good day, closer to 3.5 in afternoon traffic on the 63. I knew that road like I knew the lines on my own hands. I'd driven it 200 times in the 9 years I'd been working oil sand safety inspections up north. 3.5 hours. My son was 7 years old. I pulled up the home security app before I even started the engine. We had 4 cameras inside the house and 2 outside, something my wife Colette had pushed back on when I'd installed them 2 years ago. Said it felt like I didn't trust her. I told her it was just habit from years of site safety work, documenting everything, building a record. She'd let it go eventually. I found the basement feed. I watched it for 11 seconds before I had to put the phone face down on the passenger seat and grip the steering wheel with both hands and just breathe. Noah was in the storage room at the back of the basement, the unfinished part where we kept holiday boxes and my old hockey gear and the chest freezer. He was pressed into the corner farthest from the door, both arms wrapped around his own knees, rocking. The door was closed. The light was off. Through the infrared, I could see him shaking, the way a small body shakes when it's been crying so long, the throat gives out, and what's left is just vibration. Standing just outside the door, I could see my brother-in-law Wade's work boots. He wasn't even watching, he was scrolling his phone. I picked my phone back up and called my older brother Curtis. I need you at my house in Sherwood Park, right now. Don't ask me questions until you're in your car. I'm already moving, Curtis said. I heard his keys. That's who my brother is, 12 years older than me, retired RCMP, still moves like he's got something to prove. What am I walking into? I told him. The silence on his end lasted about 2 seconds. I'll be there in 40 minutes. I'm just past Leduc. The second call was to a woman named Josephine Chartrand, who I'd met during a workers' compensation investigation 3 years ago when she'd been contracted to do forensic data preservation for a legal firm out of Calgary. She was meticulous, methodical, and she owed me a favor I'd never cashed in after I'd testified on her behalf during a wrongful dismissal case. Jill, I have home security footage that's going to be needed as legal evidence. I need it preserved properly. Chain of custody, timestamps, the whole thing. Tonight. Where are you? 3 hours from home. Another pause. Text me your login credentials. I'll start pulling it now. All of it, or just today. I thought about that for exactly 1 second. Everything, going back as far as the system stores it. There were things I'd filed away over the past 1.5 years, moments that bothered me in the vague, uncomfortable way of things you notice and then choose not to examine too closely. The way Noah went quiet whenever his Uncle Wade was in the room. How he'd stopped asking if Uncle Wade was coming to things. A bruise on his shoulder last November that Colette said was from gym class, and maybe it was, but I'd photographed it anyway. Old habit. The way Colette's family had started spending so much more time at the house once her mother passed, and left her the property in Beaumont, plus enough investments to make the financial conversations in our marriage change completely. I thought the cameras were preparation for something I couldn't name. Now I knew what it was. I merged onto the highway and set the cruise control 11 over the limit, and I didn't touch it for the next 3 hours, except when I had to slow for construction near Wandering River. Curtis got there first. I was still 40 minutes out when he texted me, on scene. Situation handled. Noah is safe. He's with me. Do not speed. That last line made me drive faster. When I pulled onto our street in Sherwood Park at 6:47 in the evening, there were 2 RCMP cruisers parked at an angle in front of my house and an EMS unit idling in the driveway. Neighbors stood on their lawns in the warm September light. The kind of evening that feels wrong to have anything terrible happen in. Wade Perrow, my wife's older brother, was sitting on the front step with his wrists zip-tied behind him and his nose at an angle it hadn't been before. He wasn't looking at anyone. He was staring at the ground. Colette was standing beside an RCMP officer near the fence crying, but not in the way people cry when they're frightened. In the way they cry when they're caught. I'd seen that distinction once before, during an investigation at a job site in Conklin. And it never leaves you. Curtis came out the front door as I got out of the truck. He'd brought Noah with him, wrapped in a blanket from upstairs. And when Noah saw me, he made a sound that I can't really describe. It wasn't crying anymore. It was just relief, the sound a small person makes when the part of them that had started to give up suddenly doesn't have to. I crossed the yard and I took my son and I held him without saying a word for a long time. I kept calling for you, he finally said into my neck. I kept saying your name. I know, Bud. My voice wasn't steady. I didn't try to make it steady. I know. I'm sorry I wasn't here. I'm here now. Wade said you knew. He said you sent me there because I was being bad. The ice that moved through me then was a different temperature than anger. It was colder than that. I looked over Noah's head at Curtis, who gave me the small tight nod that means I know. An RCMP constable approached with her notebook out. Constable Frenette, young, professional, jaw set in a way that told me she'd been the one to open that storage room door. Mr. Lapointe, I know you just arrived. Your son needs to be seen by paramedics and then we'll need to speak with you when you're ready. I'll bring him to the paramedics now, I said. He gets checked first. Then we talk. She nodded. That's fair. The paramedics found a 2-centimeter cut on the inside of Noah's right hand, the kind you get from scrabbling at a door in the dark. His wrists were chafed. His throat was raw. One of them, a man about my age with a quiet manner, told me that Noah had been locked in the room for somewhere between 90 minutes and 2 hours based on what the neighbor had described. 90 minutes in the dark at 7 years old. I signed the forms for the hospital. I wanted everything documented, every mark, every abrasion, every millimeter. My wife tried to speak to me in the driveway. She said my name twice, Ian, Ian, and the second time her voice broke and I think she expected that to reach me. It didn't. I looked at her once, I said, not tonight, and I walked past her. Curtis drove us to the Grey Nuns Hospital in Edmonton because it was where I knew the pediatric emergency team. 2 of them had done site first aid certification courses I'd run years before. Noah held my hand the entire drive. He'd stopped shaking, but he was very quiet in the particular way he gets when he's processing something. He gets that from me. In the waiting room, he asked for a hot chocolate, and I went to the vending machine, and it was out of hot chocolate, and I almost put my fist through it. I stood there for a moment with my hand flat against the machine, just breathing, and then I got him an apple juice and brought it back, and he drank it without complaint. The emergency physician, Dr. Ferreira, completed a thorough assessment. She was careful and patient with Noah, the kind of doctor who narrows her whole world to the child in front of her and makes them feel like the only person who matters. She noted the hand laceration, the wrist abrasions, and then she found 3 older bruises. 2 on his lower back, 1 on the back of his left thigh. Various stages of healing, weeks apart. She looked at me over Noah's head while he was examining a cartoon on the wall. "How often are you away for work?" she asked. Her voice was clinical, but her eyes weren't. 2 weeks out of 4, usually, I said, sometimes 3. She nodded slowly. "I'm a mandatory reporter. This is all going in the documentation." "Good," I said. "I want it there." Curtis texted me while I was waiting for Noah's discharge paperwork. Joe called. She finished preserving the footage. "There's more than you know. She says she needs to speak to you tonight." I typed back, "We're at the hospital. We'll come to you." Then another message from Curtis. "Also, I ran Wade Perot through the system while I was waiting for you. Couple things you should know. Prior charge of mischief and one of threatening in 2019 both stayed. But there's a civil matter from 2021 that's interesting. He was named in an employment tribunal case. Falsified safety documents at a construction site in Leduc, settled out of court. He's been collecting Alberta works while running a cash roofing business on the side. I confirmed it by talking to your neighbor across the street. Wade's crew parks their trucks there sometimes." I read that message 3 times. Then I thought about Colette's inheritance. The Beaumont property, assessed at around $800,000, the investment portfolio her mother had quietly built over 30 years, about $400,000 more. The way Colette had started talking about restructuring our finances 6 months ago, the new will she'd asked me to sign that reallocated everything to her directly if I died, removing the trust provisions I'd set up for Noah. I'd told her I wasn't comfortable signing it yet. She'd pushed back harder than made sense, and I'd started to wonder why it felt so urgent to her. I'd wondered. I hadn't asked. Dr. Ferreira came back with the discharge paperwork and a referral for a child psychologist named Dr. Sutherland at the Stollery. Then she handed me a pamphlet and said, "There are resources listed on the back. You might also want to keep this number." She'd written something in pen on the corner of the paper. "Kids Help Phone," and below it, "The Distress Center of Edmonton." "For you too," she said quietly, "not just him." Joe Chartrand met us at Curtis's house in Leduc at 10:30 that night. Noah was asleep on Curtis's couch under a Rough Rider's blanket by the time she arrived with her laptop and an encrypted hard drive, and she spread everything out on the kitchen table without preamble. "The security system stored 60 days of footage before it cycles," she said. "I pulled all of it, and then I found something in the audio captures that made me go back further through the iCloud sync. Your system auto-uploads audio-triggered clips." She opened a folder of labeled files. "Wade was at your house 11 times in the 60-day window when you were up north. Colette told you 4 of those visits, possibly 5. The kitchen was very quiet." "Play me the ones I need to hear," I said. The first file was from 7 weeks ago. "My living room." Colette's voice first, low and certain, the way she sounds when she's already decided something and is explaining it to someone slower than her. "Noah's becoming a problem. Is going to tell Ian something eventually, and Ian has people he talks to. It has to happen before Ian comes back from the next rotation." Wade's voice, rougher, slightly uncomfortable. "Cole, the kid's 7? The kid is the reason Ian won't sign the financial restructuring." A pause. "He thinks the trust provisions are protecting Noah. They are, technically. But they're also protecting money that I should have full control of by now. And if Noah keeps telling Ian things, we lose the window." A longer silence on the recording. "Wait again. So what are you saying exactly?" Not a question. A clarification. "Colette, I'm saying we need him scared enough and confused enough that he stops being credible. A child that age, if he's frightened enough, often enough, he starts to seem unstable. Teachers notice, counselors notice, Ian notices. We frame it as behavioral problems. We get ahead of it." I stopped the recording. Curtis was looking at me from across the table. Joe was looking at her screen. "There are 4 more," Joe said. "They get more specific. And there's one from 9 days ago where Wade discusses logistics." I thought about Noah asleep in the next room, 90 minutes in a locked room in the dark, and I understood in that moment with complete clarity that today was not the beginning of this. Today was just the day they'd gone far enough that a neighbor heard. "How much did you capture from before the 60-day window?" I asked. "The iCloud syncs go back about 8 months. I have enough." "Can you preserve it so it's admissible?" "Already done. Metadata intact, timestamps verified, chain of custody documented." "Good." I looked at my brother. "Who do we call first?" "RCMP Major Scrimes in Edmonton," Curtis said without hesitating. "I know the sergeant running the unit. We went through depot together. We call him tonight and we walk in tomorrow morning with everything Joe has." "What about Colette?" "She was arrested this evening," Curtis said. "Wade too. Constable Fournette called me while you were in with the doctor. They're both at the Sherwood Park Detachment holding. The charge as of tonight is forcible confinement of a minor. That'll change by morning once they hear these recordings." I nodded. Something in me had gone very still, the way it gets at a job site right before you do something that requires your full attention and no margin for error. "Then here's what we're doing," I said. "Tomorrow morning, Curtis and I take everything to the RCMP. After that, I'm calling a family lawyer. After that, I'm making calls to Service Canada about Wade's benefits claim. And then I'm going to make sure the Employment Tribunal in Leduc knows about the falsified safety documents because there are still workers on those sites." Curtis almost smiled. "What else?" "The Beaumont property. I want a forensic accountant to go through everything, Colette's mother's estate, how the assets were transferred, all of it. If there's anything that should have been structured for Noah's benefit that was redirected, I want it documented." Joe closed her laptop. "I can recommend someone. She's very good." Later that night, after Joe had gone and Curtis was asleep and I'd checked on Noah 3 times in an hour, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea I'd made and forgotten to drink. I had a specific thought that I turned over quietly in my mind. During my years doing safety inspections, the thing that caused the most serious accidents was never a single catastrophic failure. It was a series of small decisions that each seemed minor on their own. Somebody didn't lock out a panel. Somebody skipped a documentation step. Somebody let something slide because they were tired or rushed or because nothing had gone wrong yet. The accidents came from the accumulation of small deceptions, small omissions, small acts of choosing convenience over care. That was what had happened to Noah. Not one terrible day, but months of small choices by people who had calculated that I wouldn't look closely enough, that I'd believe the simple explanations, that I'd keep my head down and work my rotations and trust that my family was safe. They'd been right about me until they weren't. The RCMP Sergeant Curtis knew, a man named Tremblay who'd done 22 years and had the posture of someone who'd heard everything and was still capable of being disturbed, went through Joe's file folders for 2 hours on Thursday morning without saying much. Then he looked up. The audio from 2 months ago, the conversation about making the boy seem unstable before the husband returns. He tapped the edge of his notebook against the table. "That's not just forcible confinement anymore." "No," I said. "That's a conspiracy to psychologically abuse a minor for the purpose of financial fraud. That's sections 218, 264.1, and depending on what the accountant finds, we're looking at fraud over 5,000 under the criminal code as well." He paused. "And your wife's financial motivation for having you occupy remote work sites." "I've been in northern Alberta for most of the last year and a half," I said. "Fort McMurray, then Conklin, then a site outside High Level, all remote. All my wife's suggestions. She said it was better for my career trajectory." Tremblay's expression didn't change. "I'd like to speak to whoever handles your life insurance policy." I'd changed it on her request 14 months ago, doubled the coverage, changed the beneficiary from a trust structure that protected Noah to direct payout to Colette. I told him that. He wrote something in his notebook and underlined it. The charges were amended by end of day Thursday. Conspiracy to commit child abuse, psychological abuse of a minor, forcible confinement, fraud over 5,000, and pending the financial forensics, conspiracy to commit fraud in relation to estate assets belonging to a minor. Wade faced his own separate charges. Pursual confinement, assault causing bodily harm. His Alberta Works file was flagged for investigation by Service Canada within 72 hours of Curtis making a call to the right person. Benefits suspended immediately, repayment demand pending. The Elajuk Employment Tribunal was notified about the falsified safety documents by Friday afternoon. An inspection of the sites in question was ordered. Wade's cash roofing business was no longer invisible. One by one, the architecture of their lives came apart the way unsafe structures do not, with drama, but with the quiet and inevitable logic of things that were never built to hold. I want to tell you about a Tuesday in November, about 6 weeks after everything happened. Noah had been seeing Dr. Sutherland twice a week at the Stollery. She was a small woman with very calm eyes and a room full of art supplies she let kids use however they wanted during sessions. Noah had started painting. He painted horses and hockey nets, and once a picture of our dog, Buster, who we'd had to rehome for a year when I was working the long rotations, and Colette said she couldn't manage him. I was going to get Buster back. That Tuesday, I picked Noah up from school and we went to Tim Hortons. I let him order whatever he wanted. He got a hot chocolate and a Timbits box, and he ate 4 Timbits in a row while telling me about something that had happened at recess involving his friend Mathieu and a basketball hoop and what sounded like an elaborate misunderstanding. He was laughing while he told it. Real laughter. The kind where he forgot to keep his voice down and the people at the next table smiled despite themselves. I watched him and I thought about the file on my phone from 6 weeks before. The infrared footage of a small body pressed into a corner in the dark, and I thought about how the same person could exist in both moments, and what that says about children, about what they can survive and what they can rebuild. "Dad," Noah said. "Yeah? Is Buster coming back soon?" "Next week," I said. "I talked to the Anguians yesterday. He's been eating them out of house and home apparently." Noah grinned. "That's so Buster." We sat there for another half hour and he did most of the talking. I did most of the listening. That was the right distribution. The trial was set for the following February. My family lawyer, a woman named Arsenault, who had the quiet ferocity of someone who had seen exactly this kind of case before and did not like it, filed for full custody immediately. The Children's Services assessment came back unambiguous. Colette's parental access was suspended pending the criminal proceedings. At the bail hearing, Colette's attorney argued that the financial motivation had been exaggerated, that the recorded conversations had been misinterpreted, that she was a woman under tremendous grief after losing her mother. The Crown's response was methodical and devastating. The recordings didn't require interpretation. The accounting report, delivered by Joe's contact, had found 3 separate instances of funds being redirected from structures meant to benefit Noah toward accounts in Colette's name alone, over a total of approximately $230,000. The life insurance changes, the will restructuring, the pattern of remote work assignments to locations where a workplace accident would be statistically credible. Bail was denied. The night before the trial began, I sat in the kitchen of our new apartment in St. Albert, smaller than the Sherwood Park house. No basement, big windows, Noah's artwork taped to the refrigerator, and I read the Crown's disclosure package, all of it. The forensic accounting summary, the amended charge sheet, the witness list, the photographs of Noah's injuries from the hospital. I read it because I needed to know exactly what they'd done to my son. I needed to look at it clearly and completely so that I could walk into that courtroom the next morning and sit in the front row and be steady. Not because I was holding it together, because I had already let myself fall apart privately, alone, in measured doses over the preceding months, and now there was nothing left to surprise me, just the facts laid out plainly and the people who were going to answer for them. The jury deliberated for 9 hours over 2 days. Guilty on all counts. When the foreman read the verdict, Noah was at school, exactly where he should have been. I'd made that decision with Dr. Sutherland's input. "She'll be there," she'd said. "She needs to face this. You don't need to witness it to have closure, and closure isn't something that happens in a courtroom anyway." She was right. Colette received a sentence of 14 years with no eligibility for parole for 8. The judge's remarks during sentencing were precise and without flourish. She noted that the offenses reflected a sustained and calculated pattern of behavior targeting a child's psychological safety for financial gain, and that the breach of parental trust involved was of the most serious kind the court encountered. Wade received 7 years. The others who had been present during Noah's confinement and had done nothing received various conditional sentences and probation. I didn't feel triumph exactly. I felt something more like the particular stillness that comes at the end of a long and dangerous job when all the work is done and nothing went catastrophically wrong and everyone who needed to go home went home. About 8 months after the trial, we got Buster back permanently. I'd arranged a long weekend between rotations. I was working shorter ones now, 2 weeks maximum, with a different company that kept me closer to Edmonton, and we drove out to pick him up on a Friday afternoon. Buster is a 4-year-old retriever shepherd mix with no dignity whatsoever and an absolute certainty that every human being he encounters has been waiting their entire life to meet him. When Noah opened the back door of the truck in the Niggins' driveway, Buster exploded out of their front door and launched himself at Noah with the full force of his conviction that this reunion was the most important event in recent history. Noah hit the grass, and Buster stood on his chest and licked his face in a business-like fashion, and Noah was laughing so hard he couldn't catch his breath. I stood by the truck and watched. This is what I know now. Having been through this, the thing that hurt me most wasn't the violence of what they did, though that was bad enough. It was the ordinary moments they stole. Buster in the backyard, hot chocolate at Timmy's, Noah talking too loud about basketball misunderstandings, the accumulation of normal that my son should have been able to take for granted, and couldn't, for months, that I wasn't there to see. You can rebuild normal. I know that now. It takes longer than you think, and it looks different than it did before, and some days it's harder than others. But children are not as breakable as people like Colette and Wade calculated. They are, under the right conditions, remarkably good at finding their way back to themselves. Noah is 8 now. He plays hockey on a house league team. He has a best friend named Mathieu who stays over most Fridays. He still sees Dr. Sutherland once a week, down from twice, and she says he's doing beautifully. He sleeps with a nightlight. He doesn't like closed doors. Those things may change. They may not. Either way, we work around them. We leave the door open. We put the nightlight on. We don't make a thing of it. That's what you do. If any part of what I've described here sounds familiar to you, if you recognize something in the pattern, in the small things that didn't add up, in a child who goes quiet in the wrong moments, please listen to that recognition. In Canada, you can report child abuse concerns to your provincial child protection services. In Alberta, that's Child and Family Services at 1-800-638-071C. The Kids Help phone is available across the country at 1-800-608-6868. For adults in difficult situations, the Assaulted Women's Helpline is at 1-866-863-9511. Document everything: cameras, notes, photographs, dates. Not because you distrust the people you love, but because when you need a record, you need it to be complete. And if a child tells you something, or if something in you says something's wrong, call. Don't wait to be certain. That's not how it works. You call and the professionals decide what it means. That's how Noah came home. There's a moment I keep coming back to. Not the verdict, not the sentencing, not even the night Joe spread those audio files across Curtis's kitchen table. It's the image of Noah in the Tim Hortons, talking too loud about a basketball misunderstanding, and the people at the next table smiling because his laugh had that quality, unself-conscious, unguarded, that you can't fake and can't manufacture. That was the moment I knew we were going to be okay. But I've thought a lot about how we got there. Not just the legal steps or the evidence or the charges, the actual chain of events. Because nothing that happened to my family was random. It followed a logic, and once I understood that logic, I couldn't unsee it. Colette and Wade made a series of choices, each one built on the assumption that I wasn't paying close enough attention, that I'd take the easy explanation, that convenience and trust would keep me from looking too closely at things that didn't quite add up. And for a while, they were right. I believed the bruises were from gym class. I signed papers I should have questioned. I took the remote rotations because it felt like good career planning. I let things slide because nothing had gone catastrophically wrong yet. That's the thing about harm that happens slowly. It relies on the good faith of people who don't want to believe the worst about the people they love. It's designed to look like nothing until it isn't. What stopped it wasn't luck. It was documentation. It was Curtis in the car before I finished the sentence. It was Joe picking up the phone at 10:30 at night and driving to Leduc with a hard drive. It was Tanya calling me from her landline because something felt wrong enough to act on, even when she wasn't certain. Every one of those people made a choice to take the thing they knew seriously, rather than talk themselves out of it. I think about that when I think about what kind of person I want Noah to grow up to be. Not just someone with a good heart, though that matters. And it's actually harder to hold on to than people assume, because the world will give you plenty of reasons to harden up and stop extending good faith. Keeping your decency intact when things have been genuinely terrible takes more work than most people talk about. But decency alone isn't enough. You have to think clearly. You have to look at what's actually in front of you, not what you wish were there. The cameras in my house were installed because my training taught me that clear records matter. That when something goes wrong, the documentation is what makes the difference between justice and the he said, she said that goes nowhere. That instinct, the one that says, write it down, photograph it, preserve the record, that's not cynicism. That's respect for the truth. And the truth, in our case, was what set everything right. And then there's the third thing, which is harder to name, but which I watched Noah demonstrate at 7 years old in ways that still knock the wind out of me. When Dr. Sutherland told me he was doing beautifully, part of what she meant was that he kept going. He woke up the next day and the day after that. He painted horses. He made a best friend named Mathieu. He came back to himself slowly, and a house with no locked doors and the light always on. That took something from him that I can only describe as a refusal to be permanently defined by what was done to him. That's not something I taught him. It was already there. My job was just to make sure he had the conditions to find it again. Those three things together, the willingness to stay decent, the discipline to see clearly, the refusal to stop. That's what I'd tell anyone who asks what got us through. That and a retriever shepherd mixed with absolutely no dignity and a very high opinion of himself.